Hello and welcome. This is episode 16 of a podcast Engineer-to-Manager. I'm your host, Alex Maestrenko. In this podcast, we are diving into the essence of engineering management. We explore what engineering management is and what are the challenges and opportunities. For such conversations, we invite experienced engineering managers from different parts of the world. Today's guest is Nick Cosentino. Hello, Nick. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. I'm excited to be here, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled to have you here, specifically as we chatted a little bit because of your title, to get to know and understand what is and who is Principal. Principal, you sound like a god to me, right? Principal Software Engineering Manager at Microsoft.
Would you like me to explain kind of what the principal level is and how that works?
Wait. Before we dive into that, I have to first introduce you fully because I did my homework. And second, make sure the listeners are putting this on pause and subscribing to this channel. And they're, subscribing, liking this video, put in the comments because I really want to know how it goes. Because lots of you, dear listeners, are not subscribed, and I see that you really liked our last video with 10k views. That's fantastic to get such feedback from you guys, but just let me know what you like to hear in the next videos. So back to you, Nick. You're principal software engineer at Microsoft, and previously you were technical manager and team lead in different moments in time at Magnet Forensics. This company in the domain of cybersecurity. And before that, you worked as a software developer and software architect at multiple companies. What I also noticed, you write a fantastic newsletter with a lot of technical things like refactoring, templates, and all those kind of things. That's actually interesting to understand, and let's discuss a little bit later on how you combine being a manager and then basically going down, drilling down to a really hardcore stuff. Is there anything that you would like to add to this description of your profile of yourself?
No, I think that covers most of it, right? I know we'll kind of go through a little bit of it, but yeah, like definitely, the sort of the job description parts before management, a lot of that was sort of internships and very early on in my career because I became a manager I would say very early, and probably not a typical sort of scenario. So,
okay. Well, as you said, you became a manager really early. Let's talk a little bit about your transition because you started as a tester, I think, or as a quality assurance engineer, and then you moved to a coder.
No, so for me, it was purely software development. I collaborated a lot with software testers and our test strategists. So for a little bit of background, when I had started professionally working after university, so some of the software architect positions and things like that was as internships. So in school, I had about 2 years solid of internships in a 5-year academic program. So it was really cool to have that much kind of experience in the workforce before even graduating. But when I had graduated, I started at a startup, and you mentioned Magnet Forensics, and that's exactly right. So the early days of that company was called JAD Software and Digital Forensics Company. There's like 8 people when I started there. So very small, very scrappy. And given the nature of the work, digital forensics, having, a high degree of accuracy is critical because in a courtroom, if you're reporting data and anything is off, they can technically throw out all of the data for a case. So for us, it wasn't really just like, okay, make sure the software is easy to use, make sure it's fast. It's like, it also has to be like basically perfect in terms of data representation. So for me, very early on, like making sure that testing and all of that kind of stuff was built into everything we do is just very critical.
Got it. So interesting. And then basically, let's jump to the first question that I wanted to know. Like you were team manager, technical manager, and then you went like principal software engineering manager. Like let's start from the core. Who is principal software engineering manager? Because when you go to
Sure.
software engineering roles, right, principal is a very rare person, right? A higher than person, you would say, a distinguished engineer, like Martin Flau. Well, like there are several people in the world, right? Distinguished engineers. And principals is a little bit
Right.
more, but they are still rare animals, if you want. And when I see principal software engineering manager, it just strikes me immediately, and I don't understand. Who are you? Who are
Sure.
you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you know, in different big tech companies, there's different titles for different things, right? So, for example, at Microsoft, we don't have a staff level, software engineer, engineering manager, and we do have distinguished level. We do have partner, but some other companies may not have those sorts of things. So, at Microsoft, when you start as an engineer, I don't know why the numbers are like this, but it's a level 59. I don't know why 59 to start with, but that is a junior software engineer. So if you were just starting at Microsoft, say you had an internship or you're freshly hired, you'd be a level 59, and principal is at 65 is sort of the first level of principal. So it does go from sort of that junior software engineer to an L2 to a senior, and then principal level right after that. Beyond that, you get into like partner and like distinguished, and it gets a little bit more interesting because, and I think this is great, and I hope more companies do this kind of thing. But and this is a huge topic, right, for software engineers and management. That some companies basically treat software engineering progression as you must become a manager. Microsoft is just not that case. Like, sure, there are going to be situations where people are promoted from an individual contributor to a manager, but they do have tracks in your career that you can be an individual contributor and continue to grow. So they do have a principal level software engineering manager, which is what I am, but they also have a principal level engineer. That you do not have to become a manager in order to progress. And I think that that's personally, I think that that's like a really critical thing in career development.
Got it. And just to put it on a big scale, how far away are you from VP of engineering at Microsoft? So it's like 2 or 3 steps, or just the next step in your career, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. And it's kind of interesting, right? Because I don't technically know at what level after principal, like I don't know where the numeric levels start to kind of shift because it's a little bit out of my reach currently. But I know that my CVP is, and I'm literally in the middle of a transition. Monday I start on my new team, so starting on Monday I will be sort of 3 levels from the CVP. So my manager, and then his manager, and then the CVP. So, and then that's only a few steps down from the CEO.
Well, congrats on the new team. I hope you like it, and
Thank you.
yeah, I hope you like it. Specifically with this instability on the market, and we're seeing companies in the big tech laying off people here and there with their new job title and the new team and the new position. Really happy for you to have this opportunity.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a very difficult thing, of course, right? It's really outside of people's control. I mean, as someone working in big tech, like obviously, I'm very bothered to see when it happens to different people. I know that our CVP has told us before that the way that a lot of that works is like it's not. It is sort of organization dependent, even within Microsoft. And sort of the only thing that I really have to, and it's not super helpful. I don't feel like there's anything that's really helpful for people that go through it, but just a reminder to people that layoffs are not a reflection of you as an individual. I've seen amazing people that are very tenured be sort of like let go, laid off in these times, right? And a lot of the time it has nothing to do with the individuals. It's strictly just like as a business unit. At some level, they've said this unit of the business does not make sense in these current situations. And the part that troubles me the most is that like you go through all this effort to hire these amazing people. Why would you not try to keep them? And the part that I would add on to that, even though again it doesn't really help, is that I've seen situations where they've reached out to us and said, if you see other people in organizations that have been like even within Microsoft, even, right, that have been laid off, like, let us know so we can try to like hire them back in. It just seems like a very inefficient process. But
I think it's very nice for several businesses to share information about the teams that they are laid off. Because if you have already your team working together and you're kind of do it very responsible way when you put it on the market and say, look, guys, here is our team that has been working for us, fantastic team that delivered lots of results. But you're, as you said, to business reasons, to the market situation, to not signing with a customer, we have to say goodbye to them as a team as a whole. And they're just trying to promote them a little bit. And they're, well, let's say big names or put their name behind the team. It already means a lot, right, to people. And I think it's just a small support from the company that they can really do. And we saw this in their early COVID days, right, when there was a list online with all their teams and companies and names that people were actively looking to hire for their needs. So that's the thing that the companies could do at least, right, to help this.
Yeah, fully agreed. And as I said, I know it's not easy for anyone, and I feel very bad for anyone that's gone through it. But the only thing that I have to offer is just a reminder to people. It has no reflection of you and your abilities. It's generally a business decision about the business unit, and trying to make that separation, I hope, helps some people. But I still want to recognize it makes it very difficult for everyone going through it.
I saw recently on one website a questionnaire about would you rescue or would you try rescuing your colleagues, right? So if it is money that the company is not able to pay, would you be able to sacrifice a part of your salary to secure the jobs of other colleagues? And what do you think about it?
Interesting question. Yeah. So I'll share with you. I don't know if I've talked to anyone else about this ever, except the people that were directly involved. But at Microsoft, obviously, and this was in the news, so I don't think it's like a private thing. But at Microsoft last year, they did not do salary increases. So one of the strategies so that they could help make sure that they're not increasing the amount of layoffs and stuff was they said, look, like, performance bonuses and things like that will stay in place, but there's not going to be salary increases. And so that was publicized. Obviously, it's hard news for people because, I mean, not only are people used to, if you're performing well, you should see some type of salary increase year over year, at least a little bit, right, to keep up with inflation. But now we have higher inflation and there's no salary increases. So very difficult news. But it wasn't something that was like mandated or enforced, but when it came time for performance rewards and things like that, there was a lot more focus around like, let's be mindful of budget, right? And it's not to say that in other years we're just like money's being thrown around and stuff. Like, there's a lot of consideration that goes into it. But last year in particular, I just recall that they were saying like, let's be more mindful. And when I was talking with my manager and my skip level manager, it had come up in conversations where it was like, well, kind of questioning some of the numbers I was putting forward. Like, are we doing a good job here? And I think, in all fairness, like, they're doing their job. They're trying to make sure that we are being responsible about it. And I said to my manager and my skip level manager, I said, like, if I am having to bring other people's bonuses down, I said, take it from mine then, because it doesn't make sense as someone managing the team. Like, I manage the team, I empower them. I don't contribute to the code base at work. They're truly the ones doing the work. I'm helping guide them. I'm helping navigate, helping them in their careers. But in my opinion, they're the ones truly delivering. So I had told my manager and my skip, take it from me if you're going to consider taking it from them. And I remember my previous skip level manager was also on the email, and he was like, hey, can I call you? And just like got on a call with me and was like, just so you know, I don't think we're in a position where we have to do that, but like, thank you for the the consideration. But for me, it's important that, like, the way that I look at that is, in the in the short term, yeah, it would suck for me to be like, oh, I get less compensation, less bonus or something. But what would be worse? Like, in a few months, I have a team that's extremely demotivated.
Right, and then
they start.
And what I want to say is that you can do this because you understand people on your team, right? Because you understand the level of contribution, and because you're also work together with them to create a performant team, right? So that you see that the members of your team are doing job, they're producing the code, they are contributing towards the product or the project that you're working, and that it shows you from the side where you truly believe in your team, and that's a really nice move from you, and I would say a really nice move from the manager that shows you the trust in the team, that you really want to keep this team going and not to break this team in, as you say, in their unmotivated team with a loss of one member or a few members that you will have to fill up in some moment in time.
Exactly. And I mean, like, so I don't want to try and come across like I'm a hero or something, because if you take just a strict business perspective on it, take the emotions and everything out. If I have a team that is performing well, and then their compensation doesn't reflect that, they become demotivated, they consider leaving, some do leave, let's say. If I'm not in a position to rehire, because if we're not hiring, like, we had attrition where they were not refilling headcount after a certain period of time. So from a business perspective, that's going to be so much more costly than me personally taking a hit of a little bit on a bonus or whatever else it happens to be. So part of me wants to say, like, sure, yes, I believe in the team, of course. I think that they're doing amazing work. And then me trying to represent the business as well, I want to be able to say, like, this to me is a smarter business move.
So Nick, when you were talking about their business, that's not really correct, I think, because if you talk about business, it's dollars per share, right? How much company earns and what their investors see and what is on the stock market. Therefore, is the company doing good? Well, you go on financegoogle.com, put MSFT, and you see the results, right?
Right.
If you're talking about your team, then I'm curious to understand their parameters, how you measure the team, right? And how you understand that the team is really performant.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, and I wanted to say thanks for calling that out too. I think a lot of that stems from the fact that I spent a lot of time in a startup before Microsoft, right? So very small company. It grew to like almost 300 people by the time I left, but from the entire time I'm there, even though it's not my company, I feel very much like I'm empowered. I have influence to be like, it kind of feels like it's my own, even though it's not. So I think about it that way, but you're 100% right. And one of the unfortunate things we see too is with layoffs and things like that, a lot of the time we see stock prices go up, and it's like, that to me doesn't feel good. Feel like that should be what happens, but a lot of the time we do see that. Your question though about how I look at my team's performance and how I know that we're
right. As a manager, right? You do measure your team, and they're in a big company like Microsoft. It's interesting to understand because this is a part of your job description, I guess, right? To measure and set their directions and measure their results of those accomplishment that your team does in one or another direction.
Absolutely, yeah. And it looks different. I mean, a lot of the general concepts I think apply, whether like regardless of the team, regardless of a startup versus big tech. But I would say implementation details of that can vary greatly depending on a lot of things. So, for example, before Microsoft, I had two teams that were pretty small. I had one team that worked on very similar size like pieces of work, so it was almost like it felt like a machine where we, like, as a team, we could optimize and be like, look, like, how can we keep the quality up and get more? And that's not,
what was the size of the team, just to get the clue?
That one was probably about 5 people.
Okay.
that was kind of like, and I guess the other team I had was in similar size, but they focused on very different things. So this one team was kind of like a machine and very similar size work. And I recognize that that's not super common, even though a lot of people strive for that. We got pretty lucky with the type of work. The other team I had was the exact opposite, where it was very open ended. We'd have like, so this is more about researching mobile acquisition. So like, how can you access data on phones that no one else can do? So we have things that were going for months where we'd be trying to make progress and very open ended, right? So how, like, in terms of like, is the team being successful? Well, on the one team, I couldn't just say, oh, well, you didn't figure out how to access the data, therefore, like, you're not performing well. So a lot of that was like, are we able to gain insights and learn? Like, are we building up our wealth of knowledge? Like, that was part of success. On the other team that was more of a machine, I almost hate saying that, but at the same time, I hope it makes sense that it was really just like able to be cohesive and consistent. So on that team, it felt more like velocity in terms of how much we could do with high quality. But these are going back to like a business or like a customer value sort of thing. Like, that's one part of it, and I think that's one part of how I gauge the team's success. But the other part, and trying to bridge this over to the Microsoft part as well, is like, in Microsoft and the previous company I was at, we use OKRs, objectives and key results. So these are agreed upon before we start our next phase of work. So we have leadership that is agreed, like, these are good focus areas. So for me, that's important because it's level set expectations with higher ups. It's not just, oh, we came up with this and cross our fingers that there's some value here. So that part's good. But the other piece of all of this is really about individuals' growth. And as a manager, I try to make sure that not only are we obviously doing the important things for the business, delivering value to customers, but trying to make sure that I'm challenging individuals in different ways so that they can grow in their career. So if I'm able to, in my opinion, if I can balance those things and see people as individuals progressing in their career while we're delivering on the value and meeting sort of expectations for timelines, quality within reason, then to me, that's success.
Do you have to be on the, well, again, don't perceive this as a joke, but do you have to be on the principal level to help principal engineers, or can you do help on being like a more junior engineering manager to help other independent of the level, let's say software engineers, to grow in their career, in their knowledge? So how do you, independent of your technical level, support team members that are on your team?
Yeah, and so great question. On the team that I manage, like I had mentioned, I'm switching teams. The team that I had managed, I had a principal level engineer that was a level above me, and he had been at has been at Microsoft for years. And so this was an interesting dynamic, right? Because I come on board as his manager, and he's teaching me, right? So I need to be managing him. I need to be helping him grow in his career. But here I am joining a company in a space that's doing deployments to machines across the world. I have no experience in this. He has years of experience in it. He has years of experience in Microsoft and big tech. I have 0 years. So it's a very interesting split in terms of experience and domain knowledge. But to your question, like, while I think, sure, having more experience in those areas would be helpful, I also don't think that it's required, because my opinion on managing and leading is, a lot of the time we're trying to help steer people in the right direction. And if you can help them understand their challenges and growth opportunities, which for someone that is a higher level or more technical can be challenging for sure. But if you're working with them and trying to identify where some either weaknesses are, where their strengths are, where they can play into that, and where these opportunities are coming up, then I think a lot of the time, like, the coaching aspect, it sounds kind of funny, but I've heard someone say, like, good managers or good coaches are lazy. And the lazy part is that you're not telling people what to do. You're helping them figure out what they should be doing. So
doesn't it perceive like a smaller chicken coming into the farm and saying their big hand what to do?
I think that, yeah, if you join, especially as a manager, again, this is my opinion, but if you join a team as a manager and the first things that you focus on are what you're going to change, then I absolutely think that you can have that framing of being the small chicken coming into the farm and, disrupting things. But I always take the stance of doing almost the opposite. If I'm joining something, you spend the first 30 days or so like learning, observing, right? You want to be able to ask questions and just understand how things are going, because you might start suggesting changes, and you're suggesting changes to things that are already working totally fine just because they're different than what you are used to.
Microsoft is a huge enterprise, right? I don't know how many people work, but obviously a lot. And when you're trying to make a disruption, a change in their enterprise, it takes a lot of energy to understand what exact change you will make, to document it properly, to see where there change or what process are you trying to do and how it affects other things, right, that are already working. And also a little bit of politics, I guess, as in any company, to lobby for it and to get your sponsor in the higher management who will support this. Is it correct what I'm saying?
Yes, in your opinion? And it's funny because as much as I didn't want to believe it and had heard that that's how big tech is, it is that way. It feels so much slower to do sometimes what feels like trivial things. Like, hey, we just had a conversation about this. Let's just go do it. I've seen situations where it's felt like it should be that simple, take weeks or sometimes months. And it's like, why? Almost for no good reason. But I've seen situations like that.
Did you have a chance to implement any change in Microsoft?
Yeah, I would say one, I can touch on a couple of things, and maybe one I should say is something that I feel like I did not do well, and kind of going into this new team that I'm starting, I want to do a better job of. But to start with this, I had mentioned that when I join a team, I don't like to disrupt anything. I want to observe and
send this podcast to your team. Send this podcast to your team.
Yeah, I will. I think that I lean too much into being passive. I don't want to disrupt and cause issues, because if people are working well, who am I to say make change? And I need to do a better job of, and my partner that I podcast with, when we talk about this kind of stuff, we're very similar. So it's nice to see each other remind ourselves this, but leaning into the fact that as managers, we need to be responsible for trying to drive positive change. And sometimes if people in general are not, the whole team is not kind of being part of that change, we should be empowered to step in and say, look, we can try this. Let's at least try it and move forward. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. We'll pivot. So for my own team in deployment, that's where I was working for Office 365. The time that it takes for changes to safely roll out to machines across the world, especially from an infrastructure perspective on the deployment team, that can take a lot longer than I'm used to coming from the startup world. And as a result, the time frame when we're talking about engineers work in progress, how they're doing pull requests and things like that, it is just longer than I'm used to. So my experience before has been very much oh, how do we look at our processes? Do we have a Kanban board or Scrum or something, and just trying to work on these processes. But with this team, it was I was observing we had less structure with that, and I didn't want to just go enforce anything. But I feel like after even a year of me going, you know what, it hasn't really been improving. And I don't mean to say my team was doing a poor job. I mean, I could
it's always about the small things that you see from the distance and from the side that you would like to make better, because the team can have this at an obstacle, or they can do it like, okay, we used to do this, let's do it this way, but their change can lead to something better that they didn't realize, right? And that's so it's not about saying bad, but it's rather, okay, we always can do better as humans.
And I love that framing for sure. I think that part of me was like, I don't want to disrupt, but what I should have been leaning into a little bit more is like, yeah, but I can help the team improve or take incremental steps, prove to them, look, if we try something a little bit different, like, hey, look, it's getting better. Like, you should be empowered to do the same thing. So I should have leaned into that a little bit more. But in terms of changes that I helped drive, when I came onto my team, one of the things that my manager that hired me said was, well, we want to drive our downtime during deployment down. Mm-hmm. We want a lower number. That's your team's mission. And I said, awesome. What do the numbers look like? And he said, well, you got to come up with those. So I was like, okay. So it was cool because it was, here's a charter and start, right? Like you're kind of, I don't want to say starting from scratch because the information could be gathered, but there wasn't a lot of automation in place. We didn't have a really good, shouldn't say good. We didn't have a consistent way week over week of monitoring and trying to improve. So that was something within my team, within my feature crew, within the larger team that I worked on, that ultimately helped the larger deployment team overall. So that took definitely some time.
Yeah, basically, I think it's a good problem to have with our seniority of the manager, because when you come at a certain level of seniority, you don't have precise instructions what have to be done. When you're coming in there as a junior person, okay, you just have to set up the process, or you have to follow this process, make sure the process is respected, and then you can learn a little bit what the team is doing. But when you come at certain level of seniority, you're saying, okay, this is a team, now it's yours, good luck. And by good luck, you mean like, okay, well, you can improve, or sometimes you're being told, like I've been told, like, or sometimes this is what we need to accomplish. But sometimes say like, okay, it doesn't work, make it work.
Yep.
Both.
And it's I don't want to go off on a tangent, but imposter syndrome for this kind of thing can be wild because for me, it's like, okay, you're hired in as a principal level software engineering manager. And I'm like, I'm proud of that. That's cool. And then it's like, here's a team, here's a mission, and go do it. And you start to go, well, wait a second. Like, am I capable of doing this? Like these people trust me with this. And it's just this funny situation where it's like, yeah, like in hindsight, it's like, of course they trust you with it. You have a track record of being able to do things successfully, but a lot of the time we question ourselves because it's a lot of responsibility, and it's very interesting.
And let's add additional pressure here, because your manager comes and says like, it takes too long for you to get into this. Second, you seem to propose the same ideas already the previous person had. It's like,
oh wait, they already tried that? And then, well, in fact, too, I had mentioned that this one more senior engineer that I was managing, there were certainly things where, I would question and be like, hey, like, have we thought about doing this? And he would be like, yep, 3 years ago we tried that, doesn't work. And it's like, wow, okay. So there was and not in a condescending or mean way, he's very helpful. But it was very interesting to be like, oh, I think I'm being creative, thinking about things different. And it's like, nope, like we've tried it. But what was good was that we could revisit. And sometimes there were situations where he would say, we have tried that, but that was 4 years ago and things were different. Mm-hmm. Maybe it is a good time to re-look at that because the landscape has changed. So sometimes it feels bad when people tell you, oh, we've already tried that. But I would not let that discourage you. There's going to be situations where, yeah, we've tried it and we should maybe try it again. Like it might be a good time.
Yeah, indeed, the situation changed, or it might be also an indicator that you are going in the right direction in the sense that you are looking and creating their possibilities that are not on the table, that are not there for some reason. but you are going in the direction that somebody already stepped in and the team was looking around already and like, okay, well, then you are doing some progress actually. Because it's not that you came there and you're sitting and doing just nothing, turning fingers, but you're basically looking in the ways to increase the performance, the comfort of people, and so on and so forth. So it's
right. It might be the implementation. Maybe that is not it could not be the thing that works, right? But maybe it's still a focus area that does need some improvement. And it's a matter of, okay, well, if that implementation, maybe that doesn't work, like what else could we try?
You mentioned several times that you had teams before Microsoft and at Microsoft, and their team dynamics was different. And I'm curious to understand your story, how you joined Microsoft.
Sure.
And why at the first step? Why you joined Microsoft?
Yeah,
or why you decided to join Microsoft?
Great question. So when I was at the previous company, there was a couple things going on, right? Like one big thing from a career standpoint was that I had been at this company for just under 8 years, and in terms of and like from the time that it was like 8 people, so one of the original software engineers there, but it also meant that given my tenure there, I had built I did a lot of prototyping, so I had built a lot of the foundations of each of the products they had. And in my own career development, I was at a point where, yes, I was managing 2 teams. I was spending less time coding, so it didn't make sense for me to be writing code at work anymore, even though I had been doing that for many years. And spent a lot of time almost just like rushing from team to team to be able to help them say, like, what's the history behind something? Why did we make decisions this way? What direction should we go in? So I was doing a lot of that. There were some opportunities for career growth, but one of the tricky things is, as a startup, the sort of the organizational chart, if you will, like we're figuring it out. And as a technical manager, technically there was no position or no trajectory to really, there was no level that was directly above me.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't exist. But if you were a manager that was not technical, you could go to a director position.
Okay.
So I had peers that I had hired, and they're great individuals. I don't mean to discredit them by any means. So peers that I had helped hire that, in terms of performance and things like that, I would say like I am at least on par with them. And they were getting promoted into director positions, and I could not be because there was no technical path that way. So I felt like I was doing a lot of different things and a lot of value, and then not really able to kind of move the way that I'd like to in my career. Microsoft, to be totally transparent, was not necessarily, I was not like, I'm going to Microsoft, that's it. Like, I said, I need to start looking around. And it was, I had applied to Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon.
No, you went through all the hell of interviews, I guess.
I did, yeah. And it was a roller coaster. I had been at this company for 8 years. The last time I interviewed was when I had just graduated university. And the interview at that time, this is how simple it was. I had done the interview, the behavioral part was great. And then they said, maybe we should ask him a technical question. And I said, no problem, like happy to answer. And the question that they asked me was the exact same technical question on a whiteboard that I had done for my last internship.
Okay.
So I had told them, look, like, just so you know, because I know how interviewing works, I said, I can go write the answer on this board and explain it, but I need you to know that I already know the answer. So I don't want you to think that I've just like memorized this. It's literally because I have just done it in my last round of interviews.
Right.
So, my experience interviewing was basically non-existent for almost a decade. And it's like, okay, now go interview at big tech companies. 5 rounds of interviews, behavioral, like the elite code type problems, which I don't really like at all. System design, like you have all this stuff stacked up, and I'm like, I'm not ready for this. So I had to do a lot of practice.
Wow. How long did it take you to go through all the different interviews?
I was interviewing for over a month, and depending on the company, they could get them done in like in a 2-week period almost. Like, so it was once you were sort of in on the interview rounds, it moved pretty quick, which is great. And so I was rejected by Google, which I thought was very interesting because the feedback was that I wasn't technical enough. And I thought it was kind of funny because I'm like, I have like 2 patents in digital forensic stuff, 2 more pending. Like I've been building software for.
Look, Nick, everybody has been at this point. Everybody, I think, like rejected by a company. Like, come on, guys, this is so ridiculous.
Yeah, and
you're losing the best talent.
I was like, you know what? Like, it hurt to get the feedback, and I was like, wait a second. Like, I know that I'm technical. Like, don't. It's just how the interview went. That's okay.
That's fine. That happens.
The Facebook one was canceled like the morning before I was supposed to interview. So I was like, I don't know what happened, but I think the position just got filled. And then Microsoft and Amazon were roughly around the same time. And I had 3 offers from Amazon. So
Whoa.
I was in this position and I wasn't expecting this, but it was like, do you go to Amazon or do you go to Microsoft? And everything that I heard about Microsoft culture, even though compensation numbers online and stuff look like they're less, I said, I feel like the culture from everything I hear at Microsoft is a lot more aligned to what I'm after.
Oh, nice. Do you regret not joining Amazon with their
I don't,
AWS going much better than Azure?
No, I don't regret it at all. I think that they would be different career paths. I know that in my time at Microsoft, Amazon has changed their compensation structure because they had their salaries were capped at, I don't want to say it like low numbers, but and compared to other tech companies, but they offered a lot of stock. And for me, it made me nervous to think that I'd have so much of my compensation in stock versus a salary. So no, I don't regret it. Just different challenges, I think.
What I see from Microsoft from external, that it also became much more technical company versus their business orientation. It used to be like 10, 15 years ago, because their connectivity was a GitHub, and then there was the new CEO coming on board and kind of switching the gear. So I guess it's a very good time to be at this company because you see the transformation from inside. I don't know whether you can or want to comment on that.
Sure. Yeah. I came after a point where I think a lot of people would say they observed the transition. So I've joined, and I'm not just saying this because I work at Microsoft. No one's paying me to say this, but when we have things like, being inclusive, diversity, all of that stuff comes from leadership, and it is at every single level. Truly, it's not just like Satya. It like posts on LinkedIn or Twitter or something, and then people go, "Oh, sure." Like it's truly like that at every level, which is awesome. But I have heard from people that have been at Microsoft for decades where they'll say things did not used to be like this. You used to see emails go back and forth where people were like belittling each other, and it's like I can't imagine working at a company like that. And they're like, it's just very different and for the better. So I think it's awesome, but unfortunately, I can't. I'm kind of giving this secondhand because I haven't experienced it.
Let me try this one.
Sure.
As a person working for Microsoft, do you use Microsoft products at work, like Teams and their Office? All 365.
All of it. Yeah. All of it. Yeah.
Oh.
And it's funny. Like I've always used Microsoft products. I remember the company that I was at before. They had tried rolling out Teams, and we hated it. It just felt awful to use. And we're like, no, we're going back to Slack. But what I will say is that when I use Teams at work, we do use like a dog food build. So it's all of the earliest features and stuff. But aside from things just being like, a buggy version or something, and they have to roll out a new one, the amount of features and everything that's there is wildly different in a good way than when I have like the free version on my computer for like personal use. So I can understand why some people using Teams outside of Microsoft might be like, wow, this isn't so great, but I love using it at work when it's working. So
yeah, I use Microsoft Teams and their Outlook in their paid a lot, and it's different from Slack with the threads and how you organize your messaging. but it's so integrated with
Right.
the whole Word and their Excel experience with the SharePoint is all together. So I don't think Slack gives that feeling.
Right.
So it's different, and their with their switches of different profiles is also very nicely made on Teams. But yeah, I think I'm biased here as I'm using it for the last several years. As you are as well, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. Let's switch to a different part because what I wanted to talk to you, what we announced in the beginning, as you are doing a lot of posts and they are technical. So you write about software templates, you write about different .NET stuff. You sometimes in the blog post I saw rather soft skill related articles like the number of steps to the principal level.
Mhm.
By the way, how many you made? 5 steps to the principal level?
Uh, the principal level part was interesting because in my content that I put out, I said I've never technically been promoted.
Okay.
I was hired into principal level with zero like official promotions along the way. So, but the soft skills I had written about around 6 different soft skills to that I think other people should focus on, not just coding. Yeah.
So basically, what I'm trying to say that you seem to have a lot of time invested into their technical things, not only the management part.
Right.
And I'm curious to understand how it works for you in your setup. Is it during the day job, or is it like a weekend thing that you are doing? So, or, yeah, just curious
Sure.
to understand your setup.
Yeah,
How
yeah,
you
and I
manage
think it's a great question, and I think that in general for managers, like this will look very different for different companies, different roles, and all of that. So I had mentioned before Microsoft, I was a technical manager. Part of my role, the expectations was that I was coding, and until the very end, where it was like there just wasn't time to do it. In my current role at Microsoft, I don't have any coding responsibilities. They've said like if you want you could, but there's enough other things going on that like it doesn't make sense for you to be coding. With that said, there is an expectation of your technical abilities. So being on design reviews, helping influence architecture, you are expected to be very technical, just not necessarily writing code. Now, fortunately for me, because I've been using C sharp for like 15 years and Microsoft uses a lot of C sharp, it helps a lot as a manager where I can jump on code reviews, I can talk to the engineers about technical things in code. What I end up lacking is some of the very specific domain knowledge in the code base
it?
because I'm not contributing there. But if someone brought up some code and they said, "Look, I'm having trouble writing tests here," or "How do I refactor this?" I can sit down with them, and it's just C sharp, so it's easy for me to help them with that. My technical stuff now is almost for coding at least is almost exclusively outside of work, and it shifted a lot because when I was at the startup, anything that I would be coding outside of work, I don't guilt is the wrong word, but I would get to a point where I'm making things for fun and I would say, "Wait a second, if I just make stuff for work, I know that it will have a direct impact. I know that it'll help the business, it'll help customers." And I would go, "Well, why am I making my own stuff on the side when I could just be literally having, an impact?" And at
Uh,
Microsoft, it's different because I can't just interject myself, and I probably shouldn't. But I work on a lot of my own things so I can be exploring more. So it's just shifted a little bit.
Is it more like experimental code, or are you building some software for yourself for
Both.
some purpose? Both.
So I
Okay.
do both for content creation to be able to share with just like a wider audience. I try to experiment. So the more recent thing is like leveraging Blazor in ASP.NET Core. Just trying to show people, look, like here's how I learn, here's how I'd go build things. But I also work on a nutrition platform that is something that I'm pretty passionate about. I love bodybuilding and nutrition. So building software that can help with that is it's a cool thing that's been a passion project. So part of it's like passion project, the other part's just like pure experimental.
You mentioned that you then have lots of, or some amount of technical activities outside of your work. Question comes like immediately, how do you manage your free time? And there specifically, I don't know whether you're working remotely or not. This comes an additional layer of complexity, right, of managing the free time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do work remotely purely. I'm about 40 minutes from the office. My previous teams were basically all remote. Like at Microsoft, they've all been remote. So if I went into the office, I would just be calling them from the office. So I save myself the commute. My new team that I'm going to, I think it's not enforced, but I think some of them go about 50% time. So I might try to periodically go in because I value that face to face time as a manager. When it comes to managing my time, though, one of the things that's challenging, especially at Microsoft, is we have people from all over the world. So I have traditionally at Microsoft had my engineers in North America, my partners in North America, but we also have Suzhou teams in China. So especially for on-call rotations, it's awesome because we follow the sun. It's like 24 hours. We got coverage. But we also have teams in India. And that creates, instead of me being up later at night to be online with China, sometimes I have to wake up super early to be online with India. And if you have those two things line up in the same day, you might be waking up early, working late.
Long day, long day.
Long day. But what I try to remind myself, and my management's been great for this, so it's not like, and I tell people on my team this, if you ever have situations like that, you need to be responsible for managing your own time. So would I take a longer lunch? Yeah. Would I maybe start the next day later? Absolutely. Like I will try to balance out my time so that I'm not having like a 60 to 80 hour work week just because I had things at both ends of the day.
No, makes sense actually, and specifically with the remote and the hobby that you have outside of the work. I guess you spend quite some time in the gym to invest in your hobby and support your other interests apart from the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And like for example, this Monday I saw that I have like a meeting invite for 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and I'm like, man, that's when I go to the gym. Like, what am I gonna do? So I might leave work early, go to the gym, and then come back for the call. Like I will use the flexibility in my schedule to work around that.
Can you take the call from the gym?
Yeah, like I could, potentially do that depending on what I need to be responsible for on the call. So having flexibility is great, but it's challenging because if people don't like if the flexibility is there but you're not leveraging it, then you feel like your hands are tied, and that can be difficult.
Interesting. So basically, with the remote things, and there, did you go remote before COVID, or was it the COVID that changed all the things around?
I think so. For me personally, it was purely COVID. And I'm originally from around Toronto in Canada, so I started at Microsoft remotely, and then during COVID moved out to the Seattle area. So for me, it's been a purely COVID motivated remote work. But as far as I understand, for a lot of people at Microsoft, it's been, yeah, COVID kind of made that happen. But of course, there were people that were remote as well. But I think the majority have been, yeah, it's been COVID that did it.
We touched several things, and there it looks like I'm ready for the next question.
Sure, yeah.
Here, when we talk about you as an engineering manager, you mentioned that you wanted to be more, well, not disruptive, but more brave. Let me put it in these words.
I think it's a great word.
in bringing changes or breaking things to try it out, and also supportive enough. You mentioned about technical skills that you are keeping on a certain level to be able to communicate with the guys. You mentioned about their time management. Would this be three most important skills for EM, or do you think there are other more important that we haven't touched yet?
Good question. So when I think about engineering managers in general, I don't, on the technical side of things, I think that being technical can be extremely helpful. But I've seen non-technical engineering managers do an extremely good job as well. So I like leaning into the technical side of things because I see it as a strength of mine, and because I have that, I can leverage it. I've worked with people that came from like a more of a product background, and they had just enough technical background where you're able to converse and align on things. But what they were really good at is like the people side of things. And
Mm-hmm.
it sounds a little bit wishy-washy, I guess, but the people side of things is critical. Like understanding what motivates people, what gets them engaged. I think that's like it's a huge part of it. So that part, which is, I mean, it encompasses a lot, but really understanding people is a big part of it. The next part is the business alignment, because if you only focus on the people side and you're getting people to just work on stuff, they might be engaged, but then they're not necessarily able to progress in their career because they're not working on the high priority things. You're not going to progress in your career as a manager because your management's going to say, what are people even doing? So I think having that ability to align with the business is important. And maybe something else that I would add in kind of goes back to a little bit about the being brave part is, what's a good way to say this? My friend often says we have a responsibility to like reduce chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that could be messaging from leadership or changes in an organization or changing priorities and things like that. Even discussions between very technical people that where they're not aligning. So having this ability to, take in information and try and digest it to help bring clarity and reduce chaos for teams, I think is very important.
Yeah, yeah. Well, nice point. Nice point. The last one I really like. So basically, you're managing not only people but also the entropy, right? In
Yeah.
their in the team.
Yeah, because otherwise, like if you have very technical people that are kind of going back and forth, like at some point we need to move forward. And it's just the reality of it. We can't be, it's not all theoretical anymore. Like I think that's maybe some advice for really junior people is, if you're at a company, there's people paying for software and services. So you need to be able to continuously progress.
If you would have choice now as a manager, would you go back to a pure IC role?
It's a really good question. At this point, I don't think so. And I want to share maybe a little bit more context. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do. And when I was at the startup before Microsoft, I had an amazing HR director, and she would very regularly ask me, "So, what do you think? Like, what direction are you going to go in? You don't have to know right now, but have you thought about it?" Right? She'd always try to get me to think through it. And I kept saying, like, I don't know, because I love writing code. I love building things. Like, that gets me excited. But what I started to realize is that for me, and I'm not saying this is the case for everyone, of course, but for me at least, I felt like I could have a bigger impact by helping other people. So the more that I could demonstrate, at least to myself, like, look, when you're mentoring these people, they went from being like, progressing at some rate to having way more clarity. They're just accelerated in their career growth, their productivity. I don't want to take credit for it, but I helped influence it in some capacity, and that was really rewarding. So I
Well,
needed,
you have to take credit for the result of your influence, right? Or anyway, because this was the part of your energy that you put into their people, the part of your brain and mental skills that you transformed into words that you put in the keyboard and send them in the Teams message, like to support them and to guide them.
right.
It's not that you were doing with their hands, but rather coaching, as we already said during the conversation.
Yeah, and so that's very valid. I think my point is that like it takes both sides to be able to see it, because I can coach, but if they're not willing to take action, but I needed enough examples of this where I could see like, look, coding's fun. You can still code and build things, but when you're helping other people, you can build so much more together. And my influence that way, I think, is I've seen for myself now that that's been just more beneficial.
So nice. It's you're really settled and you have a clear vision. It's nice to meet such people. So, Nick, thank you very much for this conversation. I really enjoyed it. We touched lots of different points, and it's curious to see how you work within Microsoft with different teams. And I, again, wish you good luck with your new team that you're starting next week at the time of this discussion. Did you like the conversation?
Yeah, this is great. I appreciate the really good questions. I think it's really good to touch on a lot of these different parts that aren't just the purely technical, just the people side, but like you get some career aspects and stuff brought into. Like there's software engineering is not just code. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that goes into all of these different parts of software engineering. So it was awesome to touch on a lot of it.
If people want to reach out to you, how do they do it?
Sure. Yeah. I go by dev leader on basically like any social media platform. If people want, they can find me on LinkedIn. They can shoot me messages there, Instagram, whatever. So happy to be contacted if people want to talk about anything.
We'll put the links in the description below. So another way is to find or reach out to Nick is to go below, click on the link and just start talking or connecting and reading their newsletter that Nick is producing.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So thank you again and have a good one.
Awesome. Thanks.